We begin tonight with what can only be described as a stunning display of bipartisan unity, though not the kind the Attorney General might have hoped for. In a remarkable hearing on Capitol Hill today, Attorney General Pam Bondi faced withering criticism from both sides of the aisle over her handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files, her refusal to acknowledge survivors in the hearing room, and what lawmakers are calling a systematic effort to obstruct congressional oversight. The fallout from today's testimony before the House Judiciary Committee has been swift and severe. Republican influencers, Democratic lawmakers, and independent observers are all reaching the same conclusion. The Attorney General's performance was, in their words, unacceptable and unbecoming of the office she holds. This is not a story about partisan politics. This is a story about accountability, transparency, and the fundamental question of whether justice will ever be served for the survivors of one of the most notorious criminal enterprises in modern American history. Today's hearing was supposed to provide answers. Instead, it raised more questions than ever before. And as we will detail in this report, new information emerging from lawmakers who have attempted to review the so-called unredacted Epstein files reveals a troubling pattern. The Department of Justice is not just making it difficult to access these documents. According to Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, the DOJ is actively tracking which files Democratic lawmakers examine, potentially to use that information against them later. This is not transparency. This is surveillance of elected representatives attempting to fulfill their constitutional oversight duties. Let's begin with the moment that has dominated social media and news coverage throughout this afternoon. During the hearing, survivors of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's horrific crimes stood in the gallery. They raised their hands, seeking acknowledgement, seeking to be seen by the nation's chief law enforcement officer. Attorney General Bondi, seated at the witness table, looked away. She did not make eye contact. She did not acknowledge their presence. The photograph capturing this moment has been shared thousands of times across social platforms, and the reaction has been uniformly negative. Jake Shields, a Republican commentator, wrote simply, "This is insane that Pam Bondi won't even look at the survivors. This is absolutely shameful." Another prominent Republican voice stated, "Pam Bondi's demeanor today was disgraceful. There is zero excuse as to why she deflected from legitimate questions surrounding why no one in the Epstein files has been indicted yet. I hate that Democrats don't actually care about these victims and are simply using this as political ammo. But the questions still remain, and the redactions, withholding, and handling of these files has completely degraded Americans' trust in our institutions and our leaders." This criticism from the right is significant. These are not progressive activists or Democratic operatives. These are individuals who typically align with Republican administrations. Their willingness to call out the Attorney General publicly demonstrates just how poorly today's hearing was received, even among natural allies. Kat Turd, a well-known Republican influencer with a massive online following, blasted the administration's handling of the files, stating simply, "There is no getting around this." The criticism from Democratic lawmakers was equally pointed, though perhaps more detailed in its specifics. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett delivered one of the most memorable rebukes at the conclusion of the hearing. Speaking directly to the survivors present in the room, she said, "Let me say, thank you for having more courage and moral clarity in your pinky fingers than the entire Department of Justice. We are currently the laughingstock of the world, partially because of the failed leadership within the DOJ, as we see kings and queens fallen everywhere around the world. But we don't know the basics of right and wrong in this country, because it's not about partisanship." Congresswoman Crockett went on to praise Congressman Thomas Massie, a Republican, for being, in her words, the only person on the Republican side that has a backbone and knows how to stand up to corruption. This cross-party acknowledgement is telling. It suggests that the divide on this issue is not between Republicans and Democrats, but between those demanding accountability and those obstructing it. Crockett's criticism did not stop there. She outlined a litany of concerns beyond the Epstein files. She referenced allegations that the DOJ is attempting to obstruct justice in investigations of rogue agents who have allegedly murdered American citizens. She mentioned the seizure of voter data from Fulton County, which she characterized as an attempt to steal the 2026 midterm elections. She discussed federal agents having Tom Homan on tape accepting a bribe, an investigation that was allegedly killed by the Attorney General's agency, and she raised constitutional concerns about a proposed $230 million payday for the president, which she argued violates the Emoluments Clause. Her conclusion was unsparing. The fact of the matter is that you will be remembered as one of the worst attorney generals in history, an attorney general who has prioritized obstruction over justice, corruption over the law, fealty to the president over loyalty to the Constitution. These are not casual accusations. They are serious charges leveled under oath in a congressional hearing, and they went largely unanswered. One of the most bizarre moments of the hearing came when Attorney General Bondi began citing stock market figures. In response to questions about the Epstein investigation, she pivoted to discussing the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the S&P 500, and NASDAQ performance. "The Dow is over 50,000, she declared. "I don't know why you're laughing. The Dow is over 50,000 right now. The S&P at almost 7,000 and the NASDAQ smashing records. Americans' 401ks and retirement savings are booming. That's what we should be talking about." This response was met with visible confusion and laughter from committee members. One lawmaker asked, "What does the Dow have to do with anything?" The Attorney General insisted on continuing. "The Dow has shattered 50,000 for the first time. This is crazy. They said it couldn't be done in 4 years, yet President Trump has done it in 1 year." Stock market performance falls under the purview of the Treasury Department and economic policymakers, not the Department of Justice. The Attorney General's decision to tout these numbers in response to questions about a criminal investigation raised serious questions about whether she understood her own job responsibilities, or whether she was simply attempting to deflect from uncomfortable inquiries. Beyond the theatrics of the hearing itself, substantive new information is emerging about how the Department of Justice is handling access to the Epstein files. This afternoon, we spoke exclusively with Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, who serves on the House Oversight Committee. Congressman Krishnamoorthi has personally visited the DOJ facility where the unredacted files are supposedly available for congressional review. His account of that process is deeply troubling and contradicts the Attorney General's testimony under oath about the accessibility of these documents. According to Congressman Krishnamoorthi, the DOJ has set up 4 computers in what he described as a really tiny room in a separate building. Members of Congress must travel to this separate DOJ office and wait their turn to access the computers. Each lawmaker is given a unique login and password, and here is where the story takes a disturbing turn. Congressman Krishnamoorthi now believes that the DOJ is tracking all searches conducted by lawmakers, logging which files each member views. He noted that photographers observed Attorney General Bondi arriving at today's hearing with documents that appeared to show records of the Judiciary Committee's searches. Think about the implications of this for a moment. Members of Congress, exercising their constitutional oversight authority, are being monitored by the executive branch agency they are supposed to oversee. The DOJ knows which files each lawmaker has viewed, which searches they have conducted, which names they have looked up. This information could be used to anticipate lines of questioning, to prepare defenses, or potentially to intimidate or discredit lawmakers based on what they have been researching. This is not how oversight is supposed to function in a democracy. The restrictions do not end with surveillance. Congressman Krishnamoorthi described a series of seemingly arbitrary rules designed to make the review process as difficult as possible. Lawmakers are not allowed to bring phones into the room, which is understandable for security purposes, but they are also severely restricted in how they can take notes. The congressman brought a legal pad and a binder containing redacted emails he had previously received. His intention was simple: to fill in the blanks, to see what had been redacted in the publicly available versions. DOJ personnel told him he could not write on the printed emails. He had to take notes on a separate sheet. So he switched to using sticky notes, thinking he could at least mark relevant sections. The next day, he was told sticky notes were no longer allowed. So he began writing on small notepads, tearing out the pages and placing them in his binder to keep track of which notes corresponded to which documents. Then he was told he could not tear pages out of his notepad. Every note had to remain in the pad, making it nearly impossible to organize information or connect dots across multiple documents. These are not security measures. These are obstructions. And according to Congressman Krishnamurthy, the DOJ staff implementing these rules were super nice people, but they were clearly under strict orders from the top to make this as hard as possible for members of Congress to do their duties as oversight members. This is the Department of Justice actively working against congressional oversight, the very mechanism the Constitution provides to check executive power. The technical limitations are equally frustrating. Lawmakers cannot effectively search the database. If you want to search for a specific name, say Trump or Clinton or any other individual, the search function returns mixed results. And once you open a document, you cannot use the find function to locate the search term within that document. Imagine trying to review 2 to 3 million documents without a functional search capability. It is effectively impossible. And that, according to Congressman Krishnamurthy, appears to be the point. When asked about FBI 302 forms, which are witness interview reports that survivors have been particularly interested in seeing, Congressman Krishnamurthy reported that these documents were either completely redacted or simply not present in the files at all. Even court filings from Florida and New York that should be part of the public record were completely redacted in the DOJ's version. When he accessed the supposedly unredacted files, those same court documents remained redacted. The DOJ's excuse was that these documents came to them already redacted. But as the congressman pointed out, they are the Department of Justice. Shouldn't they have access to all court filings? Shouldn't they be able to compile a complete file as required by the Epstein Files Transparency Act? The law is clear. Redactions are supposed to protect victims, not perpetrators. Yet what lawmakers are finding is the opposite. Victim names have been unredacted in many cases, exposing survivors to potential harassment and re-traumatization. Meanwhile, the names of alleged perpetrators remain hidden. The DOJ has also redacted the names of investigators, FBI personnel, and DOJ staff, none of which is required by the transparency law. The pattern is unmistakable. Protect the powerful. Expose the vulnerable. Adding another layer to this story, a new document emerged today showing what appears to be Dr. Mehmet Oz, now a Trump administration official, inviting Jeffrey Epstein to a Valentine's Day celebration in February 2016. The document raises obvious questions. Why was a future government official socializing with a known sex offender? What was the nature of their relationship? These are questions that deserve answers, and they are questions that the current DOJ appears uninterested in pursuing. So where does this investigation go from here? According to Congressman Krishnamurthy, the Oversight Committee is not relying solely on the DOJ. They have subpoenaed financial institutions. They are preparing to depose Leslie Wexner, the billionaire businessman who has been identified in the files as an alleged co-conspirator. That deposition is scheduled for 1 week from today. The committee is also speaking with Richard Kahn and Darren Indyke, the executives who managed Epstein's estate. When asked what he wants to learn from Leslie Wexner, Congressman Krishnamurthy was specific. He wants to know about all of Jeffrey Epstein's criminal operations, not just the sex trafficking, but also the financial dealings, the potential money laundering, and how Epstein became as wealthy as he did. Wexner was at the center of Epstein's world. He gave Epstein power of attorney over his finances. He allegedly transferred a New York mansion to Epstein for $1. Understanding Wexner's role is essential to understanding how Epstein operated with such impunity for so long. The congressman's message to survivors was clear and unequivocal. We're going to keep fighting for the survivors. This is in the end about them and about making sure this never happens again. I've got a 4- and 5-year-old daughter at home, and I don't want them to ever feel like this is a possibility for them in the future. There's so many ways in which this government failed the survivors. I want them to know that I certainly will not fail them, nor will many members of this committee and this Congress. This is personal for many lawmakers. It is personal for survivors and their families. And it is personal for millions of Americans who believe that justice should be blind, that the law should apply equally to everyone, regardless of wealth or power or political connections. The Epstein case represents a fundamental test of that principle. If the rich and powerful can commit horrific crimes, can traffic children, can abuse and exploit the vulnerable, and face no consequences because the system protects them, then we do not have a justice system. We have a protection racket for the elite. The anger and frustration we are seeing today, from across the political spectrum, reflects a growing awareness of that reality. People are tired of being told to move on. They are tired of hearing that this is too complicated, that the files are too sensitive, that we need to trust the process. The process has failed. For decades, the process protected Jeffrey Epstein. It protected his co-conspirators, it protected his clients, and his enablers. And now, even after Epstein's death, even after Ghislaine Maxwell's conviction, the process continues to protect those who enabled and benefited from these crimes. Today's hearing was supposed to be about accountability. Instead, it became a case study in evasion. The Attorney General would not look at survivors. She would not answer basic questions about why no one else has been charged. She deflected to stock market performance. She offered platitudes about the Trump administration's accomplishments. And behind the scenes, her department is actively obstructing the congressional investigation, tracking lawmakers, imposing arbitrary restrictions, and withholding documents required by law. The bipartisan nature of today's criticism is significant. When Republican influencers and Democratic lawmakers are saying the same thing, when independent observers and partisan voices reach the same conclusion, it is worth paying attention. The message is clear. This is not good enough. The American people deserve better. The survivors deserve better. And if the current leadership at the Department of Justice cannot or will not do the job, then perhaps it is time for new leadership. Congressman Krishnamurthy said something important in our interview. He said that people who hope this will go away should know that this is just getting started. That is the appropriate response. This investigation cannot be allowed to fade. The pressure cannot be allowed to dissipate. Too much is at stake. Too many questions remain unanswered. Too many survivors are still waiting for justice. In the coming days and weeks, we will continue to follow this story closely. We will monitor the Wexner deposition. We will track the subpoenas to financial institutions. We will report on any new documents that emerge. And we will hold the Department of Justice accountable for its obligations under the Epstein Files Transparency Act. This is not a partisan issue. This is a question of basic justice and human decency. The survivors who stood in that hearing room today, who raised their hands seeking acknowledgement, they are not going away. The lawmakers from both parties who are demanding answers, they are not going away. And the millions of Americans who are watching this case, who are demanding accountability, they are not going away either. The Attorney General can look away. The administration can tout stock prices. The DOJ can impose restrictions and track searches and withhold documents, but they cannot make this go away. Justice delayed is justice denied. And for the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes, justice has been delayed far too long already. Today's hearing made clear that the current Department of Justice has no intention of delivering that justice. So it will fall to Congress, to journalists, to advocates, and to the public to keep demanding it. Because if we do not, if we allow this to be swept under the rug, if we move on as the White House wants us to do, then we will have failed not just the Epstein survivors, but everyone who believes in equal justice under law. The photograph from today's hearing, the image of survivors standing with hands raised while the Attorney General looks away, will become iconic. It captures in a single moment everything that is wrong with how this case has been handled. It shows who has courage and who does not. It shows who seeks truth and who evades it. It shows who deserves our respect and who has lost it. And it will serve as a reminder, for as long as this case remains unresolved, of what happens when those in power prioritize protecting themselves and their allies over protecting the vulnerable. We will continue to report on this story. We will continue to ask the hard questions. We will continue to give voice to survivors and to lawmakers who refuse to give up. Because this is what journalism is supposed to do: hold the powerful accountable, shine light in dark places, refuse to accept easy lies when hard truths are needed. Today's hearing was a failure of leadership at the highest levels of American law enforcement. But it was also a reminder that there are still people in Congress and across this country who will not accept that failure as final. The fight for justice in the Epstein case continues. And based on what we saw today, that fight is far from over. Thank you for watching. We will have more updates as this story develops.